Coin collector and coin lovers. The 1972 United States quarter dollar history, context, and legacy. Introduction. The quarter dollar dated 1972 occupies a fascinating place in the long history of United States coinage. At first glance, it may appear to be an ordinary coin, one of the countless Washington quarters that passed through American hands in the late 20th century. Yet when examined closely, the 1972 quarter becomes a window into broader themes of American history: economic change, technological advancement in minting, shifting attitudes toward precious metals, and the enduring power of national symbols. This coin reflects not only the legacy of George Washington, but also the cultural and political climate of the United States in the early 1970s. This essay explores the 1972 U.S. quarter dollar in depth, its historical origins, artistic design, production and minting, economic context, varieties, and long-term significance to collectors and historians. By understanding this single coin, we gain insight into a transformative era in American monetary history. Origins of the Washington Quarter. To understand the 1972 quarter, one must first look back to the origins of the Washington Quarter series, which began in 1932. The coin was originally intended as a commemorative issue, marking the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. Washington, as the first president of the United States and a foundational figure of the nation, was already deeply embedded in American symbolism. Prior to 1932, the quarter dollar featured the Standing Liberty design, which many admired for its artistry, but which also posed technical problems, including rapid wear of key details. As plans for Washington's bicentennial took shape, the U.S. Mint decided not merely to issue a one-year commemorative coin, but to replace the Standing Liberty quarter altogether. The winning design was created by sculptor John Flanagan, whose portrayal of Washington was based loosely on a bust by Jean-Antoine Houdon, a French sculptor who had worked from life. Flanagan's design debuted in 1932 and, with only minor modifications, remained in use through 1998. Thus, the quarter struck in 1972 was part of a tradition already 4 decades old. Design and symbolism. Obverse. Front. The obverse of the 1972 quarter features a left-facing portrait of George Washington. His hair is tied in a queue at the back, reflecting 18th century fashion, and his expression is calm, reserved, and dignified. Above his head appears the word liberty, a fundamental American ideal. Below the portrait, along the lower rim, is the date 1972. To the left of Washington's profile is the phrase, "In God We Trust," which had been added to U.S. coins in the 19th century and became standard on all denominations during the Cold War era. The initials JF, representing John Flanagan, appear discreetly near the base of Washington's neck. The obverse design is understated, yet powerful. It communicates stability, continuity, and respect for tradition, qualities especially valued during periods of social change. Reverse. Back. The reverse of the 1972 quarter depicts a heraldic bald eagle with wings spread wide, perched on a bundle of arrows. Beneath the arrows are 2 olive branches, symbolizing peace. Together, the arrows and olive branches represent the balance between military strength and peaceful intent. Above the eagle is the inscription United States of America, while below it appears the denomination quarter dollar. The national motto, E pluribus unum, Latin for out of many one, is placed above the eagle's head. This reverse design reinforces themes of unity, sovereignty, and national resolve. By 1972, this imagery had become deeply familiar to Americans, yet it continued to carry symbolic weight during a time of international tension and domestic transformation. Composition and the end of silver coinage. One of the most important aspects of the 1972 quarter is what it is made of. Unlike quarters minted before 1965, which contained 90% silver, the 1972 quarter is composed of a copper-nickel-clad structure. Specifically, it consists of an outer layer of copper-nickel bonded to a pure copper core. This change was the result of rising silver prices in the early 1960s. As the value of silver approached, and sometimes exceeded, the face value of coins, the U.S. government faced widespread hoarding and melting of silver coinage. In response, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, which removed silver from quarters and dimes and reduced it significantly in half dollars. By 1972, Americans were fully accustomed to non-silver quarters. The coin's reeded edge, however, still visually resembled that of its silver predecessors, maintaining a sense of continuity even as the intrinsic value changed. Minting and production. In 1972. In 1972, the United States Mint operated multiple facilities, and quarters were struck at 3 primary locations. Philadelphia Mint. Coins struck here bear no mint mark. Denver Mint. Coins struck here carry a D mint mark. San Francisco Mint. Primarily responsible for proof coins, bearing an S mint mark. The total production of quarters in 1972 was very high, reflecting strong demand for circulating coinage in a growing economy. Hundreds of millions of quarters were struck across the Philadelphia and Denver mints, making the 1972 quarter one of the more common dates in the Washington quarter series. Proof coins from San Francisco were produced in much smaller quantities. These coins were not intended for circulation, but were sold directly to collectors as part of annual proof sets. Proof quarters feature sharper details, mirror-like backgrounds, and frosted design elements. The United States in 1972, historical context. The year 1972 was a significant one in American history. The nation was in the midst of profound social, political, and economic change, and these broader forces formed the backdrop against which the quarter was minted. Political climate. Richard Nixon was president in 1972, and his administration was marked by major events such as the opening of diplomatic relations with China and ongoing efforts to wind down U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War. At the same time, the Watergate scandal was beginning to unfold, although its full impact would not be felt until later years. Coins like the quarter circulated quietly through this turbulent political environment, serving as everyday tools of commerce while bearing the enduring symbols of the nation. Economic conditions. The early 1970s were a transitional period for the American economy. Inflation was beginning to rise, and the U.S. had recently abandoned the gold standard under the Bretton Woods system. Money was becoming increasingly abstract, less tied to precious metals and more dependent on trust in government institutions. The copper-nickel quarter of 1972 exemplified this shift. Its value came not from the metal it contained, but from the authority of the United States government and the confidence of the public. Circulation and everyday use. For most Americans, the 1972 quarter was simply a tool of daily life. It paid for parking meters, phone calls, newspapers, vending machines, and public transportation. Children collected them in piggy banks, and adults carried them in wallets and purses without a second thought. Because of the large mintages, the 1972 quarter circulated widely and for many years. Even decades later, examples can still be found in pocket change, though many are heavily worn. This long circulation life speaks to both the durability of the coin and its central role in the economy. Varieties and errors. Although the 1972 quarter is common, collectors have identified several minor varieties and minting errors that add interest to the issue. Some examples include doubled die obverses, where inscriptions such as Liberty or In God We Trust appear slightly doubled due to misalignment during the die creation process. Off-center strikes, where the design is not properly centered on the coin blank. Clipped planchets, caused by errors in cutting the metal blanks. Weak strikes, particularly on the eagle's feathers or Washington's hair. While most of these errors are subtle, they can significantly increase a coin's value to specialists who appreciate minting anomalies. Collecting the 1972 quarter. From a collector's standpoint, the 1972 quarter is accessible and educational. Because it is not rare, it serves as an excellent entry point for beginners learning about U.S. coinage. Circulated examples. Circulated 1972 quarters are extremely common and typically hold little premium above face value. However, they are still valuable as historical artifacts and as representatives of mid-20th century coinage. Uncirculated coins. Uncirculated examples, especially those with strong strikes and minimal marks, are more desirable. Coins graded in high mint state condition can command modest premiums, particularly if they exhibit exceptional luster. Proof coins. Proof quarters from the San Francisco Mint are especially popular with collectors. These coins often retain their original brilliance and are commonly found in well-preserved proof sets. Some proof coins also exhibit cameo or deep cameo contrast, which enhances their appeal. Comparison with earlier and later quarters. The 1972 quarter sits roughly halfway between two major milestones in U.S. quarter design: the introduction of the Washington quarter in 1932 and its eventual replacement by the 50 state quarters program in 1999. Compared to earlier silver quarters, the 1972 issue lacks intrinsic metal value, but compensates with durability and affordability. Compared to later commemorative quarters, it represents a more uniform and conservative approach to design, one focused on national unity rather than regional diversity. This position makes the 1972 quarter a bridge between eras, connecting traditional coinage with the more experimental designs that would follow. Cultural and educational significance. Coins often function as silent teachers of history, and the 1972 quarter is no exception. It introduces learners to George Washington's enduring legacy, the symbolism of the bald eagle, the shift away from precious metals, the economic realities of the modern United States. In classrooms, museums, and private collections, such coins help tell the story of how a nation expresses its values through everyday objects. Legacy and conclusion. The 1972 United States quarter dollar may not be rare, flashy, or highly valuable, but its significance lies precisely in its ordinariness. It is a coin that millions of Americans use without thinking, even as it carried the weight of history, symbolism, and economic change. As part of the Washington Quarter series, it reflects a deep respect for the nation's founding ideals. As a copper-nickel-clad coin, it represents a pivotal shift in monetary policy. As an artifact of the early 1970s, it offers insight into a complex and transformative period in American history. In the end, the 1972 quarter reminds us that history is not only found in grand monuments and famous documents, but also in the small, everyday objects that pass quietly from hand to hand,